straf. Dennis Bergkamp.
Persie, ja! Ja! Ja!
Daar is hij. Ja! Ja!
Daar is Klaassen, goal!
Hello there, welcome to Football-Oranje. We're your home of Dutch football, bringing you the latest on the Dutch national team and the Dutch Eredivisie. This time, we're going to be talking about Feyenoord, Quincy Promes, the World Cup qualifying draw, and much more besides. So do stay tuned for lots in this podcast. I'm Michael Statham, and as usual, I'm joined by Mike Bell to talk about all of this Dutch football stuff. We're thinking this might be the last podcast before Christmas, and we'll have one just after. You're listening to us on either YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Football Nation Radio. We're absolutely delighted that we're reaching at least 1,000 listens across all of the platforms. So please do help us keep growing our podcast, keep liking, keep sharing. We really do appreciate it, especially as we go into 2021, where we're going to be having Euro 2020 played. And if you haven't already, by the way, you can still grab hold of one of our Football-Oranje wristbands. They're pretty cool. They, if you purchase one, help our website grow further. More on that if you can find the website. If you just search up Football-Oranje wristbands, I'm sure a link will come up for them. And yeah, your support is truly appreciated. Thank you to those that have already bought one so far. Anyway, enjoy the podcast. Mike, it's been an awful week for Dutch teams in Europe. After such a good season in the group stages of the Champions League and the Europa League, we've now ended up in a situation where AZ get knocked out after a really poor defeat in Croatia. PSV top their Europa League group, so no arguments about them. Ajax getting knocked out of the Champions League with a pretty boring defeat to Atalanta. And then Feyenoord, the worst of the lot in my opinion. So what a better place to start than Feyenoord. We haven't been too impressed with them this season, and yet they remain unbeaten in the league. 7 wins, 5 draws in 12 games. And in the Europa League, they lost 1-0 to Wolfsberger, the Austrian side. A really poor campaign from them in Europe. What kind of things have you... I mean, I shouldn't speak too low about Feyenoord, because like I say, they are unbeaten in the Eredivisie this season, and they won 3-0 against VVV this weekend. But it just feels like something's wrong there. And I wonder whether it was Dick Advocaat, considering he's leaving at the end of the season. Is he just running out of steam? What do you make of the whole situation at Feyenoord?
Yeah, I think there's probably a number of things that are wrong at the club at the moment. I think that Frank Arnesen, the technical director, and Dick Advocaat, I think they're heading for a big fallout. I think before the game on Thursday, Dick Advocaat seemed in a bit of a spicy mood. I think it's mainly because of all the attention that Slot's been getting. I think it's no coincidence that, after the talks were sort of revealed, and with him, that Dick Advocaat came out and said that he's retiring at the end of the year, or leaving. At least he says he might be able to coach an international club, international team. I don't think he feels supported by the club, and I think he's frustrated by the transfer dealings in the summer, which is strange because I think that Mark Diemers and Brian Wilson have been awful signings. I think there were 2 that might have been pushed by him. I think neither of them are really good enough for his level. I think that the game against Wolfsberger on Thursday was shockingly bad. I think the whole team just lacked any sort of effort, and going forward they were a shambles. Jorgensen's just a player that's got absolutely no confidence whatsoever. Brian Winston's having a terrible season. Even Bergus didn't have a good game. I was just shocked by the fact that Advocaat just sat and watched it happen for 70 minutes. A game that you had to win. You had 0 shots on target for 70 minutes before you actually made a change. He seemed to just accept it, and he didn't even seem too bothered by it. And I think that's a coach that's, had enough. Afterwards he said they wasn't stepping down, and he still feels that the players are behind him. They won 3-0 today, but I don't think they were that great. I think they struggled in the first half, and it was only after Trinstra scored from range, with 20 minutes to go, that they went on to win easily. Maybe that's a game to kickstart, and they're getting Sinistera back. Leroy Fair made his comeback today. maybe that'll help them turn their form around. But I think it's sort of becoming inevitable right now that Dick Advocaat's going to end up leaving earlier than expected, and you're going to get Arne Slot coming in before the end of the season. I think Feyenoord is a club that's it's waiting for investment. They don't have enough money to buy the players that would take the club a position higher to maybe challenge PSV and Ajax. I think that once they start playing teams that are above them, the Ajaxes, the PSVs, after the new year, they will start to lose games. I think they've been fortunate this season to not lose games already, and I think that they are unbeaten in the league, but I don't think they deserve that. So yeah, I think right now I'd say they're probably the 5th best team in the Netherlands. I can't see it getting any better while Advocaat's in charge. Well, it just depends on whether he quits. I can't see him getting sacked since it is his last season as the head coach. So I'd take him to leave, and I think he's only leave if he has a big falling out with Arneson, which I think it will end up coming to.
I think you've pretty much summed up the whole situation there, Mike. They're just a team low on confidence. They are missing a few key players, Bailo, Fair, Sinisterra, but they will come back. It shouldn't mean that the club sort of falls flat though, and yeah, the lack of investment has led to a situation. The one transfer that I thought would come good and hasn't is Brian Linson. I thought that he'd make the step up to Feyenoord and score some goals, and it really hasn't worked. The midfield as a whole is pretty poor. They don't provide Jorgensen with enough service nor support. They don't get in and around him, and even when Steven Berghuis has a poor game, then yeah, you're in for a poor day at the office. And Berghuis has been carrying that team this season, but he hasn't had a good last few games. I watched them against Heracles, they drew 0-0, and the 1-0 defeat to Wolfsburg, and it was just so uninspiring. It's boring. And it's really sad that we're saying that about Feyenoord when they seemed to turn a corner last season, and become exciting and become a team that looked like they could win lots of games and challenge the Eredivisie title. And whilst they're only 4 points off the top, they're so far away from winning the league. It would be a massive shock if they could ever pull something like that off. And like you say, after Christmas, they're going to be playing RZ, PSV, Ajax. That's when the defeats are going to start rolling in. And there could be heavy defeats too. We've seen it a couple of years ago where Ajax beat Feyenoord really, really heavily. But at the same time, Feyenoord beat Ajax 6-2 the other season, I think it was. So the potential is still there for them to pull results out of the bag when they play these big teams, but we haven't seen that in Europe this season. They haven't pulled their finger out for them. So yeah, I don't see the season getting any better. I think it's just going to spiral out of control. Like we're already sort of seeing, it's just unravelling right before our eyes.
Yeah, I think the performance on Thursday just sums them up in Europe this season, and yeah, it's not going to get any better. I think they will lose big to possibly Ajax or PSV after the winter break, and I can't see them making any big transfers after January. And unless they get this American investment that's been rumoured, I can't see any big transfers happening for the summer either, because I can't see Kochu going for big money on the form he's in, and I don't think Bergius is going to bring big money into the club either, because he's got a release clause for such a small amount.
Speaking of winter transfers, do you think that any of the Dutch sides are going to be purchasing a key player, or do you think it'd just be like the odd loan signing? Who do you see making some business, particularly out of the top teams? Because we had a question from Cam, and he was asking who Ajax might be looking at in the winter transfer window. But my first gut instinct was I don't think any of them are going to be signing any players. I don't think they've got the money. But also a lot of the key players that were signed came in the summer. Particularly as a team like Ajax aren't competing in the Champions League after Christmas. I can't see them signing an experienced player. Maybe they'll invest in a younger player?
Possibly there'll be a few loan signings, but yeah, I agree that no one's going to sign anyone in January for a big fee. I don't think anybody at the clubs really need someone except for Feyenoord, but they don't have the funds for it. I can't see AZ Alkmaar going out and spending any money after the season they've had so far. So yeah, I think it's maybe one or two loan signings. Maybe if there's injuries in the next couple of weeks, then maybe that'll force somebody's hand. But right now, even Ajax were getting asked yesterday if they're going to recall Danilo in January because he's an option for up front. Maybe there's something like that will happen. I can't see them spending any big money on anyone.
Yeah, Danilo is a good option for Ajax actually, and I really wouldn't be surprised if that happens. It would be terrible for Twente though, who have had a marvellous start to the season, helped by Danilo's goals, and maybe they'll look for another striker if that is the case. But yeah, don't see much business happening from the top teams, and the question was relating to Ajax. Don't see it happening. Speaking of Ajax, bad news for them. Quinta Promes is being held suspicious of a potential stabbing. It was released in the Dutch media this week. And I don't know what your reaction was to that, Mike, but when I heard that it happened over the summer, I thought, does that explain why Promes has really struggled this season?
Yeah, I think it's all alleged at the moment. We don't know really anything, and it's innocent until proven guilty. But yeah, it was a big shock to see that released on Sunday morning that he's been arrested and he's been held for this. His lawyers come out and said that he wasn't present and it wasn't him, and we had to wait and see what happens. But yeah, it's a big shock, and maybe it is a reason for he's been really poor this season for Ajax. Terrible even, and it's understandable if you had something like this hanging over him. We just need to wait and see what happens in the next few weeks. But if he is proven guilty, and just wait and see, we don't know what could happen. That asks a big question at Ajax. What do they do? And that's a player that they're going to miss for the rest of the season. I think you got to know that Ajax didn't know anything about this, because if they did know something about this, and this is a possible something that could have came in, and it makes them selling Noah Lang even more stranger in the summer, because he's a player that plays in his position, and you have to see what he's doing for Club Rouge in Belgium. He's excelling over there, and he's a player that Ajax maybe shouldn't have got rid of, especially if something happens with Promise now. Yeah, it's a big shock. It's a player that probably would have been going to the Euros, and yeah, it's just a big shock that somebody that's such a big player for the Dutch national team in Ajax is being involved in a story like this. We just need to wait and see what happens in the coming weeks and how it all unravels.
All the best to Quincy Promes, though, of course, and we hope that he can come back to the form that we've seen him in before, and hopefully he is proven innocent. But I think that Ajax have got a really tricky couple of months ahead of them after being knocked out of the Champions League. They've got to really pick themselves up to challenge for the Eredivisie and think carefully about the Europa League too. And let's hope they take it very seriously, because we want to see a Dutch team going far again in European competition. Ajax have done the Netherlands really proud recently with the Europa League and Champions League runs. But yeah, another one this season would be really, really good. And lots of great young players are coming through this season again, and we just really want to see them perform. And that's what makes this season so difficult for Ajax, because there have been some really nice highlights. Seeing Per Schurz becoming a first-team regular, Ryan Gravenberch, the same thing. Two very talented Dutch footballers. But at the same time, there's a lot of average players around that team. I think we've discussed this a few times this season, Mike, but they're just not the same as they were last season when they had Hakim Ziyech, but especially 2 years ago with all of those talented players. Is it right to be critical of Ajax, given that we should have expected this sort of deterioration in the team?
Yeah, I think that you have to be critical of Ajax for the business that they've done with the past few seasons. And when you're going to lose somebody like Hakim Ziyech and his replacement in the 11 is Zachary Labiad, you're going to dip in form. And we saw against Atalanta when he went out that Labiad played and he was awful. And then you have players like Quincy Promes not playing to his standard, and up front they had to start with Brian Brobby because Wassina Traore was injured, and Klaas-Jan Huntelaar was aging. You didn't sign that proven Champions League striker that Mark Overmars was wanting in the summer. It's difficult to be too overcritical because I think that Kudus would have been a great player for them in the Champions League, but he got injured. But I don't think we've seen really enough from Anthony either. I think he's in the big games against the Liverpools and Atalantas, he didn't step up. He's looked good in the Eredivisie, but when it comes to the Champions League, he would have been the one that I would have said would have been shining, and he didn't. But yeah, I think that as much as Ajax deserve credit for the young players that they've brought through, I think Ryan Gravenberch is sensational. I think that Per Skurs is doing well. There is a lot of average players in this team. The Labyads, the Alvarez's, the Clivers, the Martinez hasn't been great this season either. I think when you're relying on people like this, you are going to struggle, and they just looked so weak against Atalanta. They couldn't create anything. I think the red card was the shambles. I think that's a horrific decision to send them off for that. But they didn't deserve to win that game. I don't think they created enough in the end to go through. And if you go into the Champions League and you can only beat Midtjylland home and away, and you can't beat a depleted Liverpool or Atalanta, then you don't deserve to be in the last 16. So I think, whereas the Ajax team of Frenkie de Jong and De Ligt was Champions League quality, this one is Europa League quality, and I think that Europa League is where this team deserves to be.
I think they'll probably get drawn against a team they can beat in the last 32, but as soon as they hit a brick wall, like a team of Benfica's quality, or say, put them in the spot here, Leicester, I just think they're gonna crumble. They don't quite have the spine that they used to have, and I think that they're a good team, and in the Eredivisie they're imperious actually. And there are times where I wonder about the standard of the league, but I also look to the other top teams in the league, and they are a step ahead of them too. But yeah, as on the European stage, you need that experience, don't you? And I don't think this team as a whole has got that. Speaking of teams though that performed in Europe midweek, we've touched upon Feyenoord, we've touched upon Ajax. We're going to be talking about PSV shortly, but RZ so close to going through, and in a group containing Napoli and Real Sociedad, finishing 3rd out of 4, that's expected, and RZ can do that. But they were so close to going through, and that defeat to Rijeka was so unnecessary. It makes you wonder, has the impact of Arne Slot leaving, or being forced to leave, and in my opinion, rightly so, by the way, I think that sacking Slot was probably the good thing to do. Do you think that has rocked the boat too much at RZ though, and it's impacted their season again?
Yeah, I think you have to say that the evidence shows that it has made a big impact. I think that under Slot, they're going so well in Europa League, and then you come to the last game, just needing, in the end, a win against a team that had already been knocked out and had nothing to play for, and to put in the performance that they did, which was horrific. There's something not right there. I think they lost for the first time in the league as well, just before that. So I think losing Slot has had an impact on the squad. I think some of the players came out and backed this decision, but a few of them came out and said how great Slot was. I think a few of them have been affected by it, and I think that we'll see this weekend when they're playing FC Twente, how that goes, and if it's another loss, then surely the board has to look at their decision to make Pascal Janssen the head coach until the end of the season, and reflect on that, because it could end up being that their season just dwindles out, and then the start that they've had with the teams above them, there's nothing to say that this is outside, if they had a poor second half of the season, that they wouldn't end up finishing 5th, 6th, and then not make Europe next season, which would be a catastrophe after the season they had last year. And then it's really up to players like Boadu and Stengs as well, to step it up. These are players that think that they should be playing top level football, and they want to be at the European Championships next year. They've got to step up in the second half of the season, and they've got to show that they deserve to be in the Netherlands squad, that they deserve to get a top transfer next summer, and that's what they need to be looking at. They can't be like, oh, Slot's gone, so we're just going to stop performing, because they won't get that big move next year. Especially someone like Boadu, who's had a really poor start to the season. So yeah, we'll see what happens with AZ in the second half of the campaign and going forward. But I think if they lose the next couple of games, then I really fear for them, because the coach obviously doesn't have the confidence of the dressing room. He's inexperienced, and then the players' heads will drop as well, and then maybe a few of them will end up leaving in January. That's the big concern. Somebody like Coop Miners, who is linked with a move to the Premier League in the summer, may end up putting his foot down and saying, I want to leave in January, because I'm sure if he did that, there would be interested clubs that would take him away.
It's a shame that a team full of such quality has fallen so far down the league and couldn't quite qualify for the European group. The fact they ran Napoli and Sociedad so close does show that they are full of good players. Some fans have been critical actually of some of their key players this season. But Ajax would love to have Amor Boadu in attack. They'd love to have Calvin Stengs on the right wing. They'd love to have Tone Koopmeiners in midfield. So you can see that these players are standing out, and they're in Frank de Boer's radar to be selected for the Euros. So let's see how January goes when they play the big teams. It's either going to go really well for them, isn't it, or really badly, I think. And if they're losing all three of those to PSV, Feyenoord and Ajax, then I mean top 5, top 6 is inevitable for them. But if they can get in amongst there and win a couple of those, all of a sudden top 4 is definitely within reach again. And we're talking about RZ going on a run, and then they're finishing the European place again. The season's still long, so we'll see what happens with them. The final team from those top 4 teams, who of course did succeed in going through in the manner they wanted. PSV finished top of their Europa League group, 4-0 against Ammonia. We had a question from Abdul. He said that he believes PSV are the most stable team and could go far in the Europa League. What do you think? I actually disagree with that, Abdul. I think out of the top 4 teams in the Eredivisie, PSV are perhaps the least stable, because at least Feyenoord are hard to beat. At least RZ have got the capabilities of beating really good quality teams, and Ajax, well, they're doing very well in the Eredivisie. Of course, a couple of defeats apart from that have been very good. I think PSV are very up and down, and they have a good home record, but at the same time, I find them to be a collection of good players sprinkled with the quality that players such as Marlon and Cody Gakpo bring. And I have a feeling in a minute you're about to disagree with me, Mike, but I just don't see them as being stable. I think that's the opposite for me, and that, like I said, they're just some good players, not average, but just some good players with a sprinkling of quality. But can I just say, by the way, that I'm absolutely delighted that Mo Ihattaren got his first goal in a whole year today, because that was so needed. He's only 18, but that last year has been tough for him. Of course, we had the break from football, but the beginning of this season under Roger Schmidt, it's like he just wanted to leave him out in the cold, but then it became very clear actually that Ihattaren had to develop himself in so many other ways, other than just what he was good at last season. To become a more important player for PSV under Schmidt, you know, he's got to be a better midfielder rather than an attacker, which is what he was doing a lot of last season. We want to see him back to his best, but also contributing in other areas. I wonder whether his goal today is going to be big for him, but also for PSV to go a step towards being a stable team in the Eredivisie.
Yeah, I think that PSV have a very, very talented squad. They have great attackers. They have a good midfield. I think we'll see the best of them in the second half of the season once they get used to playing with each other. I think we'll see the best of the player like Goetze once he gets totally match fit. And Hattaren once if he keeps playing like he did against Utrecht, I think we will see the best of him in the second half of the season. But I think defensively is where PSV have big issues. And Vogel in goal just doesn't breed confidence in me. I think defensively they can be a bit of a shambles sometimes, especially on the counter attack. We saw it in Europa League a few times this season, especially that game against PAOK where they got torn apart. I think that Schmidt's substitutions also don't help. I think we saw against Utrecht as well. He decided to take Goetze off after 55 minutes and he lost control of the game. And then Hattaren came off. And Utrecht really should have equalised in the last minute. It was only a really good block from Rosario that stopped it from being 2-2. So I think Schmidt makes strange decisions sometimes, and I think defensively they're not stable enough to go on and win something like Europa League. But I think that they can beat anyone on their day. Their attack is good enough. I think Malen scoring goals for fun now. I think he's really come into form. And I think they have, for me, a stronger squad than the teams around them. I think that they can go toe-to-toe with Ajax, I think. You've seen the youngsters coming through. They got players like Zahavi who's going to eventually come back, and we need to see more from him. I think he's been very poor since signing. He's missing chances, missing penalties. Apparently he's rubbing up a few players the wrong way in the squad as well. I think he's coming with a bit of arrogance about him. He's not very liked amongst the squad, according to reports and some of the media channels. So I think the second half of the season will be big for PSV. I think we'll see the best of them. I think it will be tight with Ajax at the top. And if the draw is favourable, I think I can see PSV going far. It's just that defensively, I don't think they're totally sound. I think that the goalkeeping situation might end up biting them in the long run.
The last thing I wanted to talk to you about this week, Mike, was the Dutch national team and the news of the World Cup qualifying draw. In their 16 group, there is Montenegro, Latvia, Gibraltar, 3 teams that they're expected to beat home and away, but also Norway and Turkey. Turkey, always a tough proposition, particularly away from home. And Norway, with Haaland now leading the line, could be a very tricky game in both home and away. So what do you make of that group? In my opinion, it's not easy, but also not a hard one. And it's to be expected that they have these teams, and they have to beat them to qualify.
Yeah, for me, it's not the hardest group they could have got, but I don't think it's the easiest as well. I think that games against someone like Norway, it's going to be tough away from home. I think if something like Haaland and Odegaard, they've got players that can trouble the Netherlands. I think it's quite similar to the group that they had in the European qualifiers a few years ago that they failed to qualify, when they had the likes of Czech Republic, Turkey, Iceland. I think it's those sort of games. I think Netherlands are better now, though. I think they're more capable of beating these sides. They've shown it recently in the Nations League, beating Poland. These are the sort of sides that Norway and Turkey are. I think that going away to Turkey first, if there's the possibility of no fans, is a big advantage. I don't think you want to go to, say, Istanbul and play in front of a noisy and ferocious crowd. So I think it is a draw that, looking at it, I think the Netherlands should top the group, but there's potential pitfalls, and I think that whereas in the past, when Guus Hiddink was in charge and he was a bit arrogant about the groups that they drew, I think if Frank de Boer keeps his squad focused and lets them know that these are tough games and that they need to be 100% in each of them, then I think the Netherlands will be fine, and I think they'll top it. But a lot will come from that first game. I think if they beat Turkey away, then that's a really, really big game out of the way. And getting 3 points from that would be huge. So I think a lot depends on that first game in March. We'll see after that. But yeah, teams like Latvia, Gibraltar, these are teams that Netherlands really should be hammering and working on our goal difference against. We just need to wait and see how it unfolds. But I've got confidence that this is a group that Netherlands can win and should win. And yeah, I'm quite positive going into it.
You spoke about Frank de Boer in a good light there, as though you actually have faith in him to make those clever managerial decisions. Are you changing your mind on him, Mike?
I think the jury's still out there, but the most recent internationals given me hope. I think that the squad gives me hope as well. I think that in the past, when you had Danny Blind and Guus Hiddink, and during a dark period, you had a squad that had players that were close to retiring, and then you had some players in there that shouldn't have been in the national team. Whereas now you've got young, hungry talents, and having somebody like Memphis Depay in there, and players like Virgil van Dijk and Matthijs de Ligt and Frenkie de Jong, and this is a team that can really manage itself at times. So you can kind of limit the damage that Frank de Boer can do to it. But the most recent internationals give me hope, and I think if de Boer continues in an upward trajectory, I'm willing to give him a chance. And I think that he sort of earned that from the most recent games. yeah, we'll see if they go to Turkey and get beat 4-0, then yeah, I'm going to start getting on his back again and then start worrying a bit. But if they go to Turkey and win, then why not give De Boer a chance until he proves me wrong?
Yeah, fair enough. Let's see what he can come up with. And the final question comes from Dutch77. Why haven't the Netherlands given Wout Weghorst a chance? They clearly lack a striker and he seems fit what they need. I think we've covered this one a few times, and I'm always saying that we should be giving Weghorst a chance.
Yeah, I think if you watch him this season, he's scoring goals left, right, and centre. I think even in interviews, he's like, "Well, what more can I do?" And that is the big question. Like, what more can he do to prove himself? That if he's scoring in the Bundesliga week in, week out, Wolfsburg are unbeaten. He's scoring. It's not his penalties. He's scoring. I know a lot of them are penalties, but he's scoring from open play as well. And then you look at Luc de Jong, who only chips in 1 or 2 goals here and there for Sevilla, and sometimes starts on the bench. If you go to any Netherlands fan and ask who would you rather have up front, starting would it be Luc de Jong or Wout Weghorst? And 9 times out of 10 they're going to go with Weghorst. It just seems to be the coaching team. It started with Koeman. It's not just De Boer, it's Koeman as well. They just seem to see something in Luc de Jong that they prefer to Wout Weghorst, which is strange, because when it comes to the games and you want players to score goals, it seems to be Weghorst week in, week out. He's even taller, and if you're looking at Luc de Jong as sort of a person that's just going to stand in the box and go and end the crosses, then even Weghorst is better than that, because he's taller and he seems to be able to get those little tap-ins that Luc de Jong's not scoring. With every week it's becoming more baffling that somebody like Weghorst isn't getting a chance, and if he continues his form and he doesn't get picked in March, then yeah, there's definitely something that's going on. It must not be his form. It must be something that he's doing, or maybe on the training ground or off the pitch, that is scaring somebody like Frank de Boer. But on terms of scoring ability, Weghorst needs to be in the squad in March, definitely.
I agree with you. And if you use him correctly, Weghorst can be so good in this system. He would be a striker who would be, helping the build-up play. He'll be given the layoffs. He's a good poacher in the box. He's a calm head. He has runners going off him on the Dutch wings. It could be Memphis, You could have someone playing just behind him. He's going to feed off him. He's a perfect player for it. It just seems weird that De Boer hasn't given him that chance yet. But he could do that in March, and we could be really surprised, and Weghorst could be the main striker. So you never know. Football's football. Anyway, Mike, thank you very much for joining me. And we look forward to doing another podcast soon, don't we, in a couple of weeks. Fingers crossed we get some more entertaining Dutch football between now and then.
Yeah, again, it's only 3-4 weeks until the winter break comes in, and I think that the games coming up are going to be exciting, and we go into the new year, hopefully with a great title race on our hands.
That's right, January's full of those big games. It's got all the top 4 sort of playing each other. Yeah, until then though, guys, please could you leave us a like, subscribe if you're new, and we look forward to releasing another podcast for you soon. Bye for now.
Dat is Bergkamp. Dat is Bergkamp.
Perversie, ja, ja, ja.
Daar is hij. Ja, ja!
Daar is Klaassen, goal!